Get your souls ready for a bit of science. Science. Well, hello listeners. A very warm welcome to you. Welcome back to Cornwall's Science Sessions, which I'm pretty sure I'm correct in saying it's your favourite show, right? I think it is. Anyway, welcome back. Weekly here, of course, 7:30 to 9 a.m. here on The Source. That's 96.1 FM, of course. You can find it online as well. Before I go any further, I'm afraid I've got some sad news. Actually, it's a repeat of last week's sad news. That is, dear old Sam, he's still away. So that means, yes, that's correct. That means I'm all on my own. Yes, terrifying, isn't it? That was a goat, by the way, in case you're wondering. Goats, brilliant noises. So last week I played a couple of mating calls. I will remind you how ridiculous they are, just for a second. So this is a penguin mating call. Just take a listen to this in case you didn't catch it last time. Utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Not quite as ridiculous, though, as this. This is a male koala mating sound. You're probably wondering how on earth I came across these. Probably best not to ask. Let's give a listen to this koala noise. So actually this, as I said last time, there was actually a paper about this noise. Because scientists like this kind of thing, apparently. No, we're not listening to all of that. That's dreadful. Anyway, I thought that penguin mating call, it didn't quite have the reaction that I wanted, I thought everyone would absolutely love that. So I thought, poor little fellow, let's give him a helping hand. So I've actually given him a bit of a remix. So give this a listen. This is the penguin mating call. This is the remix version. See what you make of this. MC Penguin in the house. This is a penguin noise, of course. Are you feeling it? I'm feeling it. Jump up! Jump! Jump! Big up in the house! Come on, baby. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. I'm not really sure what on earth is going on this morning. Let's move on, shall we? Well, okay, just allow me this one more piece of insanity, and then we'll get on with the science. Because, we've got some really exciting science for you today. Really exciting stuff. Really excited about this. We've got, first up, we've got a chat with, we managed to catch a great chap, Dr. Lewis Halsey, and he was a visiting professor, actually, from University of Roehampton. He's a reader there in comparative and environmental physiology. Now, he does some really interesting research. So one of his research topics, actually, and get this is awesome, is do animals need to exercise to keep fit? So do you see exercising animals out in the wild? He also used parkour athletes. He did an experiment involving parkour athletes. Can you believe that? How awesome is that? So do stay tuned for that, because that is awesome. And then after that, we're not letting the standard drop, because this is absolutely awesome as well. We've got an interview with Dr. Faye Thompson. Now, Faye, brilliant researcher. She works with the Banded Mongoose Research Project in Uganda. And she was actually looking at, now this is going to sound a bit strange, but gang warfare in banded mongooses. So this is gang warfare occurring out in the wild in species, nothing to do with humans, of course. When I say gang warfare, you might think humans. We're not talking about that. We're talking about banded mongooses. These look quite cute, little animals, but no, apparently they all get together and have these massive group fights. I don't know what's going on there. Mental. They also seem to kick out. Right now, this is just harsh. Now, okay, fine. I can sort of understand that there's this gang warfare going on. We'll talk to Faye about that a bit later. But no, okay. This next bit is what really gets me. So the dominant individuals tend to target related females to kick out of the group. Just let that sink in a second. That's like booting your own mother out of the group. I mean, I can kind of imagine booting my other half out of the group, but probably not my mother. Anyway, yes. So we were talking about that. Violent little things. Brilliant stuff. Anyway, so we'll be talking about both of those topics later. So that was Dr. Lewis Halsey, visiting reader from University of Roehampton, and also Dr. Faye Thompson from here in Exeter. But I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to do this. That goat scream that I played earlier. Let's just give that another listen. Come on, give this a listen, right? That is probably one of the most ridiculous noises I've ever heard. And then I came across this, which is equally ridiculous. This is a frog screaming. Did you know that frogs could scream? Well, they can. It kind of sounds a little bit like... don't know, really. Maybe like putting chili pepper in a cat's eye. That's what that sounds like to me. It's a bit grim, isn't it? Let's forget that I said that. Anyway, so you might remember that we had a bit of a great horror soundtrack on one of the previous shows. Well, and I thought, hang on. These goats, and this frog actually, what if they teamed up to make the ultimate horror soundtrack? Imagine the results. Well, as it turns out, you don't have to imagine the results, because here it is. So this is the ultimate horror theme tune, horror soundtrack. I imagine quite a lot of companies will be, contacting me. Stephen King will probably want this one. Brilliant. Anyway, give this a listen. Terrifying. Now, I apologise if this is a bit too spooky. We have got Halloween covered next year. that one is just ridiculous, that last one. Anyway, okay, let's move on. I realise this is just getting a bit out of hand now. Let's move on to the science. So, first up then, I promised you this interview with Dr. Lewis Halsey. He was a visiting researcher from Roehampton, University of Roehampton. And he's talking today about, we called him over lunch. This is a great timing, actually. Popped in to catch him over lunch. And he was going to be talking to us about his work. And now his work, as I was saying, is absolutely awesome. So if you've ever wondered how parkour can possibly fit into science, well, you won't be wondering for much longer, because here is how it does. So this is Dr. Lewis Halsey, ladies and gents. Give him a quick round of applause. Come on. Okay, thank you. Right, here he is.
Hi Ben, thank you very much. Lovely to be here. My name's Dr. Lewis Halsey. I'm a reader at the University of Roehampton in London, and I study comparative physiology. So in essence, I look at different animals that live in different environments and have different setups, different physiologies, different morphologies, and I compare them to understand more about how they're adapted specifically for the habitats in which they live.
A lot of your work to do with kind of whole organisms and their ecology has a focus on energy.
Energetics is a central strut running through my work, as you pick up on. Energy expenditure for animals is really fundamental to them, okay? Unlike, a lot of human beings anyway, they can't go down to Tesco's or Asda or something and get some food when they need it. They've got to work hard for it all the time. And so they've got a finite amount of energy, so they need to spend it judiciously, right? If they're using it for one activity, they haven't got it for something else. If they spend a lot of time running around looking for food, well, that's great, but that's less energy to put into eggs or, large offspring or whatever it is. So they've got to be careful with it, and so this is fundamental to all animals. It doesn't matter big, small, watery animals, terrestrial animals, in the air. Energy expenditure is, at least arguably anyway, fundamental to them. So this is something that is central to my work when I'm comparing these different species. However, it's really hard to measure, particularly when you're outside of the lab. It's not how do you measure energy expenditure outside the lab? Well, in the lab we can measure oxygen consumption, right, which is basically energy expenditure by another name, put simply. That's hard enough as it is. Outside the lab we can't measure oxygen consumption. In the lab you'd do it, you'd put a mask on the animal, okay, and you'd capture its breath. Can't really put a mask on an animal outside, so you've got to measure something else that relates to oxygen consumption. So what we tend to do is put small data logging devices on animals that measure something that relates to energy expenditure, something that correlates with energy expenditure. That could be heart rate, or a common one these days is accelerometry. So in other words, the movement, the amount of movement of the animal's body. And it kind of makes intuitive sense. The more you're moving, this is inclusive of humans, the more you're moving, the harder you're working, the more energy you're using. So if we can measure the amount of movement of an animal's body in the wild, if we've managed to calibrate that in the lab, then we can estimate their energy expenditure in that way. It's quite a complicated and involved procedure, but it gets us an answer in the end.
Sure. It's interesting because I guess it's at its very core, it's kind of a very simple and very strong kind of idea that ultimately energy is kind of key pretty much everywhere you look in biology. So you've got the metabolic theory of ecology, of course, which essentially states that so many different rates and so many different traits of animals can ultimately be fed back into what's going on at the level of the energy, essentially, and the kind of workings of the enzymes. But interesting that you were saying about it's just difficult to measure, though, in a lot of scenarios. One thing which I found really cool, actually, when I was having a little look at the kind of stuff that you've been involved with in the past, was when you took parkour athletes as a model for apes, essentially moving in the habitats, almost quite entertaining. But it's because you can't just go into the wild, can you, and strap things that can measure energy on apes.
No, that's spot on. So that's a really good example. Take orangutans, which are perhaps the archetypal tree-dwelling ape, right? They live up in the trees. These trees bend. They're flexible. So they have the potential to sap the energy from these orangutans as they're moving around in the trees. And of course it's a 3D environment, so sometimes these orangutans are having to move up through the trees. And they make it look easy, but it takes a lot of energy to do that. You imagine trying to climb a rope, right? It's hard if it's possible at all. And then the food they've got up there, these fruits are quite low energy, the low energy density. And then these orangutans are big. I mean, they're not like a squirrel, right? They're big animals. They're basically the size of human beings. You're thinking, well, that doesn't seem a very clever adaptation to being a tree-dwelling ape with low-grade fruits to eat. Why are you big? Okay, so we started to look at this. Now, the problem is, we can go into the field. First of all, it takes days to even find an orangutan. You've got to see that. To even observe one is hard, right? And then you've got to capture it, which is ethically unsound. Even if you did capture it, then you put a data logger on it, like I was saying earlier, to measure something, its body movement. Well, all the orangutan's going to do is take the data logger off and break the data logger. It's going to break the data logger. So we said, well, okay, we're not even going to try. Okay, somebody should try, okay, but it's not going to be me. Life's too short. So we asked parkour athletes, street gymnasts, whatever you want to call them. We said, will you mimic, as best you can, orangutans in the lab? So we got them into the lab. The lab was a gym, a massive, like a gymnasium where gymnasts would do their stuff. And we got them doing various activities which somewhat simulate movement in an arboreal forest. And we asked them to make the sort of movements, swinging from the hands and this sort of thing that orangutans do. Now, they can't perfectly simulate an orangutan, okay? They can't do it. Even parkour athletes can't be orangutans. They'd like to be, but they're not. But they get quite close. So it gives us an opportunity to get some insights in how these orangutans can survive. In other words, spend little enough energy in that very tricky three-dimensional environment that they can survive and reproduce and be a successful species by looking at these parkour athletes in the lab. And then in the lab, the great thing with an athlete is you can ask him or her to do something and they will do it. Unlike an animal where you've got to train them, they'll do it. And the parkour athlete, you can put the oxygen mask on, you can get the data. So actually that became a tractable, viable way to look at orangutans. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to Borneo. That's the one downside.
Yeah, but at least you saved the data loggers. They didn't get destroyed, right? Hopefully they didn't.
Not too many of them. One or two, actually, amazingly. But
another project which I think sounds really awesome, a paper you put out recently about it, the question, do animals have to exercise to keep fit? Because, again, on the kind of energy theme, this is something which you might not really think about.
So this is a paper that I wrote not too long ago, but to be clear, it's got no empirical data in it. It is just posing a question. It's just saying, hang on a minute, human beings kind of we go to the gym, or we go for a run, or we cycle to work, or whatever it is to keep as fit as we'd like to, or at least try to. Do any animals have to do this? Now, no one's really asked the question or look into it. I think intuitively people would feel that animals in the wild, it's a tough life, so they're working hard in their everyday activities anyway, and that keeps them fit, right? So they're fit. Well, that may be true. I think that probably is true for a lot of animals. But imagine you've got an animal that plods around very slowly during the day, grazes on grass or something, right? Grazes on grass, so it's just very, very slowly moving a little bit, standing still, just eating, just very low grade stuff. But every now and then it gets attacked by a predator, and it's got to run fast. And it might have to run fast up a hill, and it might have to run fast for quite a while, I don't know. So how does it maintain the fitness to do this? Because as a human being, if you're doing very little exercise day on day and you suddenly got to run a few hundred metres up a hill, you basically can't do it. And people often don't realise, we don't realise how unfit we are until we've got to do it. And of course, you only realise how unfit you are once if you're being run down by a predator.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so are there any animals out there, right, that are saying, well, effectively saying, crikey, I'm not as fit as I want to be able to outrun that predator or compete with conspecifics, compete with other animals of my own type for mates or whatever it is. I'm not fit enough by just plodding around day on day. So maybe they run around a bit or do some sort of exercise that we wouldn't notice as being exercise. They just seem to be running around. Are they? And then if they are, what are the implications? Again, there's an energetics issue. Doing running around to keep fit costs energy and time that they're therefore not using other things. Also, maintaining more musculature or a stronger heart or more vascularization of their body, you know, so they can pump more blood around. Because they are fitter, maintaining that costs more energy. So then there comes again this energy issue for them. Well, they might think, well, I mean, subconscious, right? But they might think, well, I want to be fit, but actually there's an energy trade-off for doing that. There's no point in spending too much time getting too fit because I'm burning a load of energy for this. So I just raised that question, just thought about different species. There are some animals which, so for example, hibernating polar bears. Okay, they spend months underground, eat nothing, right? And all they're surviving on is their own body. So they're losing weight. Okay, they're fasting. But when they come above ground, they've got to eat. They're hungry. Well, again, they can't go to Tesco's. They've got to fight seals or walruses or narwhals, right, and kill them. So they can't lose that much physical fitness. Otherwise, they're just never going to eat again. And actually, measurements of key muscles in polar bears demonstrate that although they do lose body mass, they don't lose mass from those key muscles, which presumably maintains their strength so that when they appear out of hibernation, they're physically capable to forage. Other species, for example, there are animals that migrate a very long way once a year or twice a year. How are they suddenly able to do this? Birds that fly, we know flying is energetically costly, and yet they seem to do no physical exercise before migrating. They don't do any practicing before they run their marathon or their equivalent of the marathon. It seems like there are just hormonal changes in animals that suddenly mean they start to get buff. They start to get big muscles. They're not going to the gym, but there's just an endogenous, as we would call it, an internal to the animal, some trigger that gets, you know, I'd love to have that myself. I'd love to just turn it on, ready for the beach holiday, right? You know, I'm going to have a beach holiday in a few weeks' time. I think I'll just, we can't do that. Absolutely. So then finally, the question is, well, why is it that animals such as human beings don't have that capacity? Why is it that we don't just turn on fitness when we want to? And why is it that some animals do? Can we explain that by their ecology, by the type of lifestyle they live? Nobody knows the answer to this. So there's some interesting things to delve into, and I was just raising this question and hoping that some people out there will be able to look into it.
Listeners as well, I definitely urge you to go read that paper. It's nice and short as well.
Nice and short, yes. That's the best thing about it.
Yeah, it's awesome. You touched on there about this whole kind of trade-off thing, and this is kind of what I wanted to return to, and I spoke at the beginning about this energy theme, which is clearly running throughout a lot of your work. Because, of course, that is a very general thing, isn't it? We use trade-offs in biology, energetic trade-offs, to actually explain a multitude of traits, even number of eggs and things like that. Because, of course, if you use energy for one thing, you don't have it for another. As simple as that.
Yeah.
Could you kind of talk us through that a little bit?
Okay, so let's put it in a different way. So I was watching, what was it? The film Alien, right, on the television. Okay, so for those who don't know the film Alien, and there's a bunch of these films, right, you get these alien beings which are very, very nasty and kill humans, right, and they're incredibly powerful, and they basically, you get a parasite that hatches out of an egg, and then it attaches to the human being, lays an egg in the human being, it bursts out the human being, and as a smallish thing, maybe 6 inches in length, and then very, very rapidly it grows into something many times larger than the human being, and it's incredibly robust. And, well, I'm not saying these things can't exist somewhere in the universe, but it seems highly unlikely for the following simple reason. The amount of energy that this animal would need to accumulate in order to grow at the rate it's growing is just off the scale. It's just inconceivable, okay? So in these films, and obviously sure, the films are for fun, right? But it makes the point that there's just finite amount of energy available. So you're putting a huge amount of energy into growing very, very quickly. You know, you're not going to be building your body of very high quality materials. Certainly not the sort of materials that these alien animals were, which were extremely robust and could deal with very low temperatures and very high temperatures and all this thing. It just doesn't make any sense. They are not taking in and assimilating in energy at anywhere near the rate they would need to produce themselves. Okay, and that's why lions are big but not ridiculously big, okay, or whatever. And this is why, actually, in part, why a lot of very large animals died out, because it's all very well being the biggest animal out there, right? And you're defended for other animals from your size. You can attack other animals because of your greater size, but boy, do you need to eat a lot to do it, particularly if you're an endotherm, particularly if you're a warm-blooded animal, because you're stoking a fire inside you to keep yourself warm, and that costs a lot of energy, as everyone knows who pays a gas bill for their home. So energy is really finite. So it's all very well, you put it into having big claws or big muscles or just big size per se or lots of eggs. You do that, you're not doing something else. So there's a major trade-off for animals. It is not obvious that to have a big this or a big that or a refined that is a good thing, because you're spending it on that. You do not have that energy for something else. And we need to bear that in mind. Human beings, as long as we can afford it, we enjoy generally having, say, 3 hearty meals a day. Something like that. That's great. That's an enormous amount of food. Okay, given that most of us spend most of the time sitting there, not doing a lot. You watch people on a long-haul plane flight, okay, and they get a meal when they get on the plane. 4 or 5 hours later, having sat there watching films, they get another meal. 4 or 5 hours later, just before the plane lands, they get another meal. You think, well, no one's done anything, right? All they've done is get up to go to the loo, okay? You take something like an alligator, for example, similar-sized animal, 70, 80, 90 kilos, whatever. Because they're ectothermic, because they don't try and maintain a certain body temperature that's actually quite high, as humans do, but they don't. They use far less energy. Estimates of something like 10% the amount. Maybe it's more like 20%. But they can survive on hundreds of calories, just hundreds of calories a day, whereas a fully grown adult male, humans, probably 2,500. So there's an example of, we put a lot of our energy, for example, into maintaining warmth in our body, which gives us advantages. We can run around in all sorts of temperatures, which gives us advantages of access to food and so forth. But we pay a massive price for it by the amount of food we have to eat. Again, if you're living in a Western society, as long as you're not at the bottom end of the demographic, as it were, you can afford to do that, and it's actually quite enjoyable. But you imagine having that food from the shop taken away, and you've got to go out and forage, like on Bear Grylls Island. I mean, they're all losing weight incredibly rapidly on Bear Grylls the Island, going back to TV shows. Because it's incredible, and they go. Sorry, I'm going on about it, but they go out there and they capture 1 fish for 10, right? You think, well, this is when they're all dead excited about it. You're thinking, really, that fish has probably got 5,000 calories in it, right? So it's a big fish, but that's 500 calories per person. That's what someone's eating for one breakfast, and the weight is just dropping off these people. So it's a really big issue for wild animals' energy. So you put it into one thing, you haven't got it for something else. And key, ultimately, whatever these animals are, whether they're aliens from the television or cows plodding around in the field, ultimately, they're trying to reproduce. If you put too much energy into yourself and being wonderful yourself, you've got too little energy for your offspring. So you don't pass your genes on for the next generation. So evolutionarily, you might as well not have bothered at all.
Oh, I love the example of the alien, actually. We've actually almost got a term for that in biology, haven't we? A Darwinian demon. Essentially, a perfect organism. Why don't they exist? Because of these trade-offs. Naively, you might think, oh, well, why don't you just have something which is just good at everything? But this is the reason, right? Because you have these trade-offs.
Yeah, and you see that beautifully in the animal kingdom, in the true animal kingdom that's around us, and not in the films, which are great. But you see these trade-offs. You see that there is nothing that's ultimate. However, you do see that some animals are doing far better than others in terms of a number of offspring. I mean, obviously, being small is the simplest way to achieve this. Smaller animals tend to have a lot of offspring. Perhaps they don't survive, so that's an issue. But certainly, some animals are doing a lot better than others. It's not necessarily because they've got big claws, however.
Dr. Lewis Halsey, ladies and gents. He's got to be one of the top interesting scientists I've ever met. He's a brilliant guy. Same goes actually for Dr. Faye Thompson, who we'll be talking to later. But Dr. Halsey is coming back to talk to us again. So do stay tuned. Don't be tempted to go away, because he's coming back. Message to share first. I just love the fact that we delved into there why we don't get perfect organisms in nature because of these energetic trade-offs. Simply speaking, of course, you have to use energy wisely. You invest in one particular trait or one particular lifestyle, and you don't have energy available for other things necessarily. So, I think we can probably make a general comment on life there, can't we? Let me just get my backing, because that means that we're all just as good as one another. We've just invested in different things. Some may be good at sport. Others may prefer science. But it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. Right, okay, sorry about that. I'm not quite sure what came over me there. Anyway, let's carry on with the science then. Dr. Lewis Halsey, we'll be hearing from him again in a second. We're going to be talking, actually, I captured him again over his lunch break. I know, very harsh of me, but he's just too interesting. I couldn't let him go. We're going to be talking, actually, a little bit coming up next about, so it's quite a controversial idea in science, this aquatic ape hypothesis. Originally, I think 1960, I think this was originally proposed in, this aquatic ape hypothesis. And basically the general gist of it goes like this, that in the past there could have been, or one of our kind of common ancestor could have been more of an aquatic mammal. There were certain lines of evidence which certain people were arguing pointed to that. Now, of course, this has been largely rejected by the scientific community, but what it has done, this hypothesis, is it has actually caused some kind of related research to emerge in recent years. So Lewis is going to be talking to us a little bit about one of those such projects, which kind of inspired, if you like, by this hypothesis, by this idea, when you're testing some of the ideas of this hypothesis. And it actually comes out with something very interesting. So we'll hear from that in a second. But before we do, I would like to again remind you about how awesome it would be. So if you heard that section just gone with Dr. Lewis Halsey, he was talking about animal exercise, amongst other things. And one thing which came up, which is something which I'm never going to forget, because I'm going to be irritated about this for, I think, probably for as long as I live. But there are certain organisms who can, literally just switch on their fitness. So without having to exercise, without doing anything, their muscles just get bigger and they get buff, as Lewis was explaining. That is just completely unfair. Can you imagine just walking onto the beach and just suddenly, Well, I've actually got a bit of a song for this. So just imagine me walking along the beach, not a very attractive man, I'm afraid. But then, one day if I had this this kind of adaptation, I could just suddenly, whack up the fitness levels. Then I reckon this would probably be my soundtrack. All right, probably also Lewis's soundtrack as well, I imagine. Give this a listen. So just, I'm walking along the beach. Oh, suddenly, bang! Oh, what's just happened?
When I walk on by, girls be looking like Debbie Fly. I pimp to the beat, walking down the street and my new the freak, yeah. This is how I roll, animal print pants out control. It's Red Bull with the big ass bra, and like Bruce Lee, I got the clout, yeah. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. I work out.
I don't work out.
Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. I work out when I walk in the spot. This is what I see. Everybody stops and is staring at me. I got passion in my pants and I ain't afraid to show it. Show it, show it, show it. I'm sexy and I know it. I'm sexy and I know it. Yeah, when I'm at the mall, security just can't fight them all. And when I'm at the beach, I'm in a Speedo trying to tan my cheeks. This is how I roll. Come on, ladies, it's time to go. We headed to the bar, baby, don't be nervous. No shoes, no shirt, and I still get service. Watch. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. I work out. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. I work out when I walk in the spot. This is what I see. Everybody stops and is staring at me. I got passion in my pants and I ain't afraid sexy and I know it. Aye. I'm sexy and I know it. Check it out. Check it out. Wiggle, 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 yeah. Wiggle, 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 yeah. Wiggle, 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 yeah. Wiggle, 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 yeah, yeah. Do the wiggle, man. I do the wiggle, man. Yeah. I'm sexy and I know it. Hey. Yeah. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. I work out. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. I work out.
Absolute tune.
I'm sexy and I know it.
And I don't even have to work out, well, at least I wouldn't if these, if I had the adaptations that these migratory birds that Lewis was talking about. If I had those, then then that would be true. Right, so I promised you that we'd hear it again from Dr. Lewis Halsey from the University of Roehampton, talking this time about this kind of controversial aquatic ape hypothesis. Talking about some research was kind of inspired by that idea. That idea in general, of course, is quite controversial. But what Lewis is going to be talking about now is some research which he actually did, which was inspired by this kind of idea. And what he comes out with is very interesting. So just give this a listen. So again, we caught him over lunch. So do excuse the general lunch noises here. Thank you to Lewis for letting us attack him during lunch and record him. So here it is. Dr. Lewis Halsey, ladies and gents.
I'll admit I'm a little bit cautious about this because it's quite a contentious area and it's something that I'm not an expert in, but briefly it goes like this. We're still unclear, I guess we probably always will be, about how our ancestors, humans' ancestors, if you go long enough back in history, they were quadrupedal, essentially like a dog walks on four legs. And obviously we are, after the first couple of years of our lives, we're bipedal. Now that's a massive change, or arguably that's a massive change from being a quadrupedal walker to a bipedal walker. There's some big, arguably anyway, some big anatomical changes, some big neurological changes that have got to happen for that. Now I think that is debated to an extent, but nonetheless it seems pretty different on all fours to upright. So how did we evolve from being quadrupedal to being upright? And relatively recent work suggests that we actually became at least somewhat bipedal in the trees, starting to move around the trees on two legs, perhaps holding onto branches above us with our arms. And that seems the most solid evidence at the moment. Some people have suggested that there may have been an aquatic element to this. Now there's some, I think, pretty crazy ideas about the aquatic ape, which were pushed forward in the 70s and didn't really survive, really looking at the data carefully and modern fossil record that came through. However, a few people are still arguing about whether there could have been some aquatic element to our development. And it's this, that if when we came down from the trees, we spent some of our time wading in water to look for foods there, in the riverbeds, invertebrate river organisms, or maybe tubers in the riverbeds or whatever, to spend time in reasonably high standing water, that would support our bodies. So maybe at that time, we're talking a long time ago now, but quadrupedal animals predominantly able to go bipedal, and we would be supported in that endeavour by the fact that the water's up around our waist or maybe even our chest, and that may have been a crutch that supported us moving from being quadrupedal towards being bipedal. There's a question about whether there's an element there. Now there was some work done on this that suggested it was tremendously expensive to wade through water, because much harder to work through water than through air, it's much denser. I did some work, just one piece of work that pulled together the literature on this. I collected some data myself with colleagues and looked at a couple of previous studies that looked at this, and actually our analysis of the data suggests that wading through water wasn't prohibitively energetically expensive so long as the water wasn't really, really high up the body. In other words, if you're wading through water that's neck high, it's very expensive to do, and quite frankly, you almost naturally go into a swimming posture. If you're wading through water that's kind of knee high or thigh high, which would perhaps be more common, then actually there wasn't a big cost to doing this. And so it's a small piece in the puzzle, but there wasn't that argument of wading through water would be too expensive at that kind of heights of water to be prohibitively expensive for finding food in the water that would create a net energy gain. I hope that makes some sense, but I think there is something to be argued that wading in water might have supported developing our evolution from quadrupedal to bipedal, but that shouldn't be confounded with bigger ideas about aquatic water-breathing humans at some point in the past, which is almost certainly untrue.
So that was Dr. Lewis Halsey, ladies and gents. As I said before, brilliant chap, very interesting research that he does, really cool stuff. If you want to hear more about his kind of work, there's a website you can head to, www.rubel, so Rubel, rubel.org.uk. We've also got that link on our Facebook page, so if you find Cornwall Science Sessions, I think if you type in the little @ symbol, that @ Cornwall Science Sessions, in the Facebook search bar, it should come up nice and easy. We've got that link there as well if you want to check it out, which I do advise you to do. He's very good at kind of talking about research without using all of these kind of complex jargon and things, which is always very nice. So that's awesome. Okay, so I promised you then that we'd be talking to another fantastic researcher, Dr. Faye Thompson from the University of Exeter this time, so based right here in Penryn actually, and she's been doing work with the Banded Mongoose Research Project out in Uganda. Now this work is really awesome. And again, if you head to our Facebook page, and also you'll find the link to the Banded Mongoose Research Project Facebook page there as well, you'll find actually a video on there, and a few different videos. We've got a particular video on our Facebook page, courtesy of Dr. Thompson and team, so thanks for that, which is absolutely amazing. And basically what it's depicting is this kind of gang warfare going on in the Banded Mongoose. Now I'm not going to talk about that too much. I'm going to let Faye explain that in a second, because we've got that interview coming up. But it really is amazing to see that these animals they are literally having a war, basically. It's quite amazing to think that humans aren't the only species that do that. Of course, work in the past has shown that we know humans do it, right? we see that. Also, we see this kind of thing occurring in apes, but it's just crazy to think that actually maybe it's more common than you might assume. This kind of gang warfare. There's also another kind of type of violent interaction. It's actually made headlines recently in BBC News. So congratulations to Faye and team on that, and that's awesome. About this kind of group eviction thing going on. Again, I'm not going to explain what that is. Let's listen to the interview. So see what you make of this. If you've got any questions, obviously, as always, get them to us. Pop them on our Facebook page or whatever you want to do. I'm sure I can forward any questions to Faye. I'm sure she would. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer those. Anyway, let's hear from Dr. Faye Thompson now from the University of Exeter.
I'm a postdoctoral research associate at the Centre for Ecology and Conservation at the University of Exeter here in Penryn. I work on the Banded Mongoose Research Project, which is a long-term project that studies the social behaviour and cooperative behaviour of banded mongooses in Uganda. And my research specifically focuses on conflict in this system, so I'm interested in why conflict arises in cooperative species and how it's resolved. And banded mongooses are a really great system in which to study this because they have very conspicuous helping behaviour where individuals will help to raise pups that aren't their own, but they also have this very conspicuous conflict in their groups. It's manifested normally in aggressive evictions from the group, and that's something that I've been looking at recently.
There's been a few papers which have kind of made headlines in the media recently, haven't there, which have been really cool. You hear this spin in the media of kind of this gang warfare that's occurring in mongooses. It's surprisingly violent things by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
With these evictions. But I guess there's kind of two areas that I'd really like to talk about. On the one hand, you've got this grouping together for this kind of gang warfare kind of style behaviour, and on the other hand, you've got within a group individuals being evicted.
Yeah, so there's these kind of different types of conflict that occur in banded mongooses. One is, as you've described, between groups. So rival groups will engage in aggressive fights with one another, and we understand that that's to do with fighting over competitive resources like food and territory, but also over mates. So part of my work was looking at why those fights happened and what the consequences were for individuals and groups. Another form of conflict in this species occurs within groups, and that's manifested as these very violent evictions of own group members from their social group.
Let's return first of all to the kind of between group conflicts. Because I think that's the immediate thing that might make you think of is, we know a lot about that kind of thing in humans, don't we? And there's been a lot of work done in chimps, I assume.
Yeah.
What kind of reasons did you find for that behaviour? I think you kind of outlined them very briefly there. But,
so we found that groups are more likely to engage in violent fights, violent interactions with neighbouring groups when rainfall is low and population density is high, so when there's maybe lots of competition for resources like food and territory. And we also found that groups were more likely to engage in these fights with rivals when females were in estrus, so when they're receptive to breeding. And we think that this shows that groups might be engaging in these fights maybe to get matings with other groups.
In quite a lot of depth, I guess we've spoken about this intergroup conflict, this kind of gang warfare, if you like. But of course your kind of latest research was actually this individual rejection from the group, being kicked out of the group, and you found related females would like to be kicked out as opposed to unrelated ones, which immediately sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? Because that's probably not what you would expect from something like kin selection.
So classic kin selection theory would predict that individuals should be nicer to their closer relatives and nastier to their non-relatives. And we've actually found that during these violent evictions, the banded mongooses target their closer female relatives for eviction from the group. And this was a really puzzling result. We tried to explain this result using game theory, so using some theoretical models and equations to try to predict why this result might happen. And we found that actually it might be that closer relatives are less likely to resist being evicted, and so are more likely to be targeted by dominant individuals in the group for eviction.
It kind of turns it on its head, I guess, doesn't it, really? And looks at it from the individuals being rejected and try and understand it from that point of view, so that's awesome. You think you might take this research further? I'm guessing it's quite a fruitful area at the moment, it seems to be, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So have you got kind of projects on the go at the moment that you can talk about? Or?
Yeah, so I'm still working on the Banded Mongoose Research Project, and my postdoc at the moment is looking more at these intergroup fights, so these fights between rival groups. So I've been looking at mortality rates of across the population from these fights, and looking at how they might compare to other species that engage in these very violent fights as well. So you mentioned humans are a really good example of species that engage in this warfare type behaviour, and also chimpanzees. And we've got some evidence to show that banded mongooses actually, the rates of mortality following these intergroup interactions are as high and sometimes even higher than that recorded in humans and chimpanzees. And there's some theoretical evidence that having a really high levels of mortality from intergroup fighting might actually drive the evolution of cooperative behaviour within groups. So we're kind of investigating these two things at the moment in the banded mongooses.
Awesome, that sounds great. So definitely listeners keep an eye out for this kind of stuff coming out. Anything else that you'd like to kind of add, or any messages to put out there?
No, just thanks to everyone in the group for all their hard work and support, and also to our amazing field team in Uganda, which are instrumental in helping us collect all this amazing data to analyse. So thanks to them
you've been watching these particular mongooses for a while, haven't you? Isn't it like an 18-year so far?
Yeah, so the project's actually been running for over 20 years now. It was started by Mike Kant, who's the PI on the project. He started the project during his PhD, and he worked with Francis Mangusha as his field assistant in Uganda. Francis is now our field manager, and he runs the Ugandan field team, of which there are 5 amazing guys that do all this really great work for us out in Uganda with the mongooses there.
Awesome, thanks for that. Actually, one last question. I hear this is the dreaded question that you got asked this for your BBC interview as well, and that is it scientifically accurate to call mongooses mongoose?
It's not. It's definitely not. It's mongooses.
Oh no!
I can confirm that now.
Well, now I'm going to have to bring the interview to a close now that I know that fact. It's just ruined everything for me. Well, thanks very much, Faye. Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Well, I'm going to rebel against the system. I much prefer mongoose. Mongoose is just so much cooler. Anyway, that was Dr. Faye Thompson. So thanks very much, Faye, for talking to us about that. So this kind of research is absolutely incredible. As I said before, there is a video, a really cool video that you can check out. Head to our Facebook page, is the easiest way to find it, and also head to the Banded Mongoose Research Project page as well to see much more information on that. Really amazing stuff. So just to recap then, we've been talking about this kind of group or gang warfare that occurs in banded mongooses in this kind of study population in Uganda that they've been looking at. As I was saying, they've been looking at this particular population for around 20 years now, which is quite remarkable. Anyway, we're looking at this kind of gang warfare and also this group eviction. And this group eviction is surprisingly violent. And what happens actually is it tends to be as Faye was explaining there, it tends to be the more related females who get targeted by the dominant individuals for eviction, which is very surprising, as Faye was explaining there, kind of why that might be. But it's just quite amazing, isn't it? Imagine just chucking out like all of the females in your family. I don't advise doing that. Don't try it. Okay, right. Let's. Before we move on, actually, I've got a bit of a song. So talking about these kind of fights, these kind of battles, I thought we could probably do with a soundtrack for that. So I reckon this is the theme tune for this mongoose research group. And I'm guessing it's probably also Dr. Faye Thompson's theme tune as well. So let's give that a listen. See what you make of the theme tune. Mongooses are lining up. There's a lot of tension. Things aren't looking good. One of them's got that look in his eye. Things are going to go down. Yep. Great song. Electric Light Orchestra, of course. That was the theme tune for the Mongoose battles that we were talking about earlier with Dr. Faye Thompson. So thanks very much to Faye for that. Well, I'm sure we'll attack her again at some point and get her back on the show. That's probably what should happen. Right, anyway, it's probably about time, but I gave you a cheeky weather announcement. Unfortunately, we don't have Sam with us today, so I'm very sorry. This isn't going to be quite up to standard. I'm not sure whether I'm even allowed to use the jingle. I tell you what, I'll go for it, but I can only apologise. I'm not Sam, ladies and gents. I'll give this a shot anyway.
The weather with Sam.
Actually, with me today, I'm afraid. Sorry about that.
Hot, steamy, and that's just in the studio.
I can confirm that it is quite hot and steamy in the studio right now.
Take it away, Sam.
Right, okay, well actually a very boring one, I'm afraid, today. It's a bit cloudy, basically, overcast. Kind of reasonable chance of rain later on. That's kind of it, as far as that goes, I'm afraid. So, dull, rainy, boring, essentially, is what it's going to be today. And there's just one notice for travel today, which I'm going to let you know about that. And it's actually just a road closure due to roadworks, and that's the A3058 Northway, Cuntrell Downs. That's about it. That's pretty boring, wasn't it? That wasn't up to Sam. Actually, hang on. I mean, I know that Dan is listening, so I don't want to get the weather wrong for him. So let me just double check. I was going to look out the window. Hang on. Yeah, pretty boring, pretty dull, pretty boring out there. Yeah, I've just looked out the window. I can confirm that it is cloudy. Oh, hello. It looks like Dan has just sent me a photo as well, saying it's cloudy. Yes, okay. It is cloudy. I can see. Sent me a photo. Thanks for that, Sam. Thanks for that, Dan. Sorry. Yes, okay. That's excellent. So that's the end of your weather announcement. You'll be pleased to know Sam's back next week, so you'll have, you won't have to put up with that nonsense ever again. Thank you, Dan, for that. For that assistance there. Right. Hang on. He's saying what's good? He's saying the photo is of the sun. Well, I assume the sun is there, mate, but the sun's covered by the clouds. That's kind of what cloudy means, right? I am assuming the sun is still present. I'm pretty sure we're still orbiting it. No, he's typing. He's not standing for this. Well, I don't know. We'll continue this. We'll continue this debate later, ladies and gents. Anyway, actually, because Dan is listening right now, I do have a song for him. This is actually a song that goes out for Dan and his dog Copper. His dog Copper, awesome little dogums. This is a theme tune for those two. I think you're going to like this. So, Dan, Copper, this is for you.
I never had no one that I could count on. I've been let down so many times. I was tired of hurting, so tired of searching, till you walked into my life. It was a feeling I'd never known. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. You're more than a lover. There could never be another to make me feel the way you do. And oh, we just get closer. I fall in love all over. Every time I look at you, I don't know where I'd be without you here with me. Life with you makes perfect sense. You're my best friend. You're my best friend. Oh yeah. stand by me and you believe in me like nobody ever has. When my world goes crazy, you're right there to save me. You make me see how much I have, and I still tremble when we touch. I know the look in your eyes when we make love. You're more than a lover. There could never be another to make me feel the way you do. And oh, we just get closer. I fall in love all over every time I look at you. And I don't know where I'd be without you here with me. Life with you makes perfect sense. You're my best friend. Ooh, you're my best friend. You're more than a lover. There could never be another. Make me feel the way you do. And oh, we just get closer. I fall in love all over every time I look at you. And I don't know where I'd be without you here with me. Life with you makes perfect sense. You're my best friend. Oh, oh, oh. You're my best friend. My best friend. Oh yeah. You're my best friend. My best friend.
Tim McGraw, My Best Friend. Brilliant track. If that song wasn't written about a dog, I don't really know or really care what it was written about. That is definitely written about a dog. So that one was for Dan and his dog Copper. Really cute little dog, Copper. It's great. Got another kind of emotional song like that coming up in a bit as well. So what I'm going to tell you now is there's no need to be alarmed, because we actually have another absolutely awesome section coming up. So I'm a bit disturbed because I think quite a few of us might have missed on the very first show, so back about 6 weeks ago, we played this really cool chili farm interview. And this was, I visited the South Devon chili farm in South Devon, of course, near Salcombe, near Kingsbridge. And we chatted to Steve Waters, the founder of this chili farm. And we spoke to him, and he's a really, really cool guy. They do really cool chili sauces. I can tell you that right now. Chili chocolate as well. And of course, we did try some of those chili peppers. And I think Sam a couple of shows. Actually, hang on. I've just had a bit of a breakthrough. I've just realised why Sam is away. I'm pretty sure one of the last things he did was he had to try a bunch of chili peppers from there, the hottest ones, obviously, in his chili pepper blind taste test, which I think he was in quite a lot of pain after that. So that possibly explains why he's not returned to the show quite yet. He will do, I'm sure. I have faith. Don't worry. And there'll be no more chili peppers. That's a promise. Anyway, we'll hear that interview coming up next. So I think, well, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a couple more tunes. I've got a few really nice tracks to play you. So let's carry on with that. And hang on. Oh, not this again. The haunted telephone. I really need to get an exorcist to sort out this phone. I don't know. Oh gosh, who's it calling this time? Oh no. Where's a priest when you need one? what's it? Who's it calling?
You have dialed has not been recognised.
Oh,
Please check.
it failed. Oh, that's quite lucky.
The number you
Oh,
have dialed has
whew.
not been recognised.
Well, that was very, very convenient, folks. I've got a suspicious feeling it was attempting to dial Jared just then. I'm just going to check it. It's not going to do that again, right? Just going to double check that. Because I haven't got so much faith when it comes to the telephone. I think, as I've said before, I am convinced that it's haunted. Let me just double check that we can't have any silliness like this again. Okay, that's just you can. This isn't me typing the number in. This is me double checking. Nothing's mysterious is going on here. All I'm doing is I'm just calling out a priest, an exorcist, sort this out for us. No priests available by the looks of things. Well, I guess that's quite convenient then. That's lucky, isn't it? Great. Well, the haunted phone has not struck today. That's very convenient, as it turns out, because we haven't really got time for it. So let's move on then. I'm going to play you another track, as promised, before this Chili Farm interview. So, this is another song, and I think this is probably yet another song, probably written about a dog. If it isn't, again, well, it is. I'm saying it is, okay? This is Soul Companion. Great track.
All of our dreams are laid out and measured, arrows and pins and a rainbow of threads, like hope on a string sewn into the linings, for the courage to face the unknown ahead. My soul companion, out in the world somewhere. My soul companion, I'll meet you there. I'm back in my compass, trusted and tested, my dog-eared maps to study and fold. Into a pocket I'm traveling light now. All that we have is all that we hold. My soul companion, in my heart you are. My soul companion, just like a star. There are no borders, there are no boundaries, there are no fences up around me. But I get quiet and I get lonely, just like everyone. These are the old roads, these are the stations. I look for my ride, you wait for your train. These are the chances of life's incantations. These are the places that don't know our name. My soul companion, love finds its own way in. My soul companion, now let us begin. My soul companion, out in the world somewhere. My soul companion, I'll meet you there.
Oh, good lord. I think the haunted telephone is in action, ladies and gents. I don't know what to do. It's...
Hello?
Source FM. You're live. You're live. Live. You are in fact live. Any words? Any words for our listeners? That was terrifying. Is your phone haunted as well?
Any words for our listeners?
Can you hear us? Good.
Hello?
Good lord. Well, that's terrifying. Let's enough of that. Enough of that. Hang up. That's fine. That was terrifying. Somehow it is copying itself. I think that's what happens if you get two haunted telephones together, ladies and gents. Right. Anyway, as promised, then I'm going to leave you with this this chili farm interview that I promised you. Again, just to repeat what this is. So a while ago, I went to visit the South Devon chili farm, and we chatted to the founder, Steve Waters. Awesome guy, and talking about his chili peppers, of course. They're awesome, really great stuff. Very well. You can get some extremely hot ones. So they've got a very big selection. They've got a cafe there as well. You can actually go and try all of the sauces, which is really cool. Their hottest sauce, called the Reaper, it's made with Carolina Reaper chilies, which are currently, I believe they're currently among the hottest chili peppers in the world. I can guarantee, I can confirm, that they are extremely hot. Very tasty though. Very tasty. So I'm going to play that interview for you now. So thanks to Dr Faye Thompson for appearing on the show earlier, and thanks also to Dr Lewis Halsey for appearing on the show. So this is the South Devon Chili Farm. Well, good morning, listeners. Today I'm going to convince you that there's something special about chili peppers. Now, chili plants, originally native to South America, were spread across all of the Americas by humans over 6,000 years ago. In fact, scientists in Washington found tiny microfossils of substances from chili peppers on cooking pots and other evidence dating to over 6,000 years old. Then later on in history, in the late 15th century, the very famous Christopher Columbus brought back chili plants to Spain after his voyage to the Americas. Then something quite remarkable happened. Within the next 50 years or so, after chili plants arrived in Spain, they spread to the entire world. So actually, as it turns out, chili plants were probably the first plants in history to be globalized by humans. So there's clearly something special about these chili peppers. But if you don't know what all the fuss is about, or even if you're a seasoned jalapeno fan, but you've not yet experienced the diverse world of chili peppers, then you're in luck, because just a stone's throw away from Cornwall, according to Jamie Oliver, you will find the best chili peppers in the country. So I'm here today at the South Devon Chili Farm with founder Steve Waters. So Steve, thank you very much for joining us today. Real pleasure to have you on board in the show today.
Nice to meet you.
And I think what we're going to ask you first, if that's okay with you, is what makes chili peppers so special to you personally? What made you kick off this kind of business, essentially growing chilies and selling chili peppers?
It wasn't something that I studied to do. It was just a hobby that slowly got out of control, really, and it was driven by the desire to sort of follow up on recipes that I was finding in Mexican cookbooks, Indian cookbooks that were calling for chilies that I couldn't find. So I did a bit of research, found that the seeds were available at least, or becoming more available, and that's where it started. A small greenhouse, off I went.
The thing which strikes me when I walk into the South Devon Chili Farm, this lovely little farm shop, you can look around at the products they've got on offer. There's just loads of different types of these different chili peppers. So if I say chili pepper, I guess most people might think, jalapenos and kind of red piri-piri peppers. But we're talking, ones that look black and gold and green and red and lots of different shapes and things. Interest for us is, as biologists, is how you manage to cultivate and actually successfully grow so many different kind of strains, if you like, of chili peppers, because it must be quite a tough process.
It's certainly got easier. The varieties are being developed all the time for different purposes. There's a lot of varieties that are grown to suit certain growing environments. So people have taken to growing chili plants at home. So obviously, if you're growing on a windowsill, they have to be of a certain size. And then the colour variations are all over the spectrum. We grow about 40 or so varieties that we call our crop plants. So that's the majority of what we grow in the polytunnels here, and those feed the production on site to make our sauces and preserves that we then sell in the shop and through other shops in the country and throughout Europe now. And then we have another, say, 50 varieties that we grow specifically for pot plants. So we have a nursery here, so customers can pop in and buy pot plants, and those have smaller plants with smaller fruits that suit a windowsill inside a house. And then we have another set of plants that we grow that we're experimenting with, so new varieties. We have a chili collection here which is made up of about 200 varieties. That's from all the sections that we grow. And one of the polytunnels here is reserved just for that purpose. We plant that about beginning of April each year, and then by the sort of midsummer it looks quite amazing, and that's the main part of the attraction here. We've got a shop and cafe, of course, but people come to sort of browse through all the 200 varieties. There's little name tags and a bit of history about each one, but it's more about us sort of getting out the word that there are a much larger pool of chilies to draw from a sort of a flavour point of view, rather than just focus too much on the heat side of things.
Sure. Yeah.
So we're surprised all the time when we grow new varieties, what they taste like, when they're cooked in certain ways, the flavours and aromas they pick up when they're dried. It's sort of, so we're learning as we go, and then passing on that learning to our customers.
Great. I mean, it's no surprise in a sense, I guess, that it really is this versatile ingredient, because, I mean, as we were talking about earlier, it was the first cooking ingredient to be globalised, basically. So it's nice to be able to actually explore that a bit further and don't just stop at, well, jalapenos, basically.
Yes, and we have lots of visitors, particularly during the summer, from all corners of the globe. So we have people from India visiting who are amazed at the selection that we have here, and from the Americas. So it is, we sort of pulled together varieties from all over the world. So it's as far as we know, it's the sort of the widest collection that you can sort of visit and see growing pretty much as they would do in the wild.
I also like the kind of quite diverse range of products as well. So you're also selling chili chocolate, I think, as well, aren't you?
Yes, there's we did a bit of research early on, and that was just something that we experimented with. Making chili chocolate in very small batches to start with, but it's one of our main products now. Of course, there are sort of historical evidence that goes back to the Aztecs, and we've always said since we started the product that it was a very sort of Mexican thing.
Sure.
But when my brother moved to Mexico about 10 years ago, and he mentioned that his brother in the UK had a chili farm. We made chili chocolate, a Mexican thing. His work colleagues had never heard of it, so we were sending chili chocolate to Mexico for his Mexican work colleagues to try for the first time. So, which was not what we expected.
No, I mean it's received great reviews as well, hasn't it? I even saw that Gillian Anderson, famous actress from the X-Files, she's quoted as saying that it's her favourite chili chocolate she's managed to find in the world. Actually,
she's very kind to us. She does sort of tweet and drop very sort of pictures and comments now and again, which helps a lot. Yes,
that's excellent. Well, actually, I think today I was going to take home because I think you've got here, haven't you? You've got the hottest current chili pepper in the world. I mean, I'm sorry to come back to the hot nature of chili peppers again. But I think it's the Carolina Reaper. Is that right?
Carolina Reaper. Yes, it is incredibly hot. It's a little bit reluctant to put on a lot of fruit. That's the only sort of downside for us as a food producer. So at the moment, because of the growing capacity that we have here, we do tend to run out of that fairly quickly. It's very popular.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a very hot chili, but it does have a very good flavour. So it's a bit like using a strong herb. Really, you just have to put it in the right amount.
Sure, used in moderation.
And also if you use it with the right ingredients in a recipe, then a lot of that heat is sort of mellowed out throughout
Sure,
the dish,
yeah.
and then you notice more of the flavour.
Sure.
So, for instance, if you use any sort of dairy product with it, so cheeses and things like that, you can get through to the flavour of it. But even then, it's a chili that has to be used in very
Sure.
small
Yeah.
doses.
Worth experimenting with. Then.
Yes,
For
yes,
sure.
yeah.
So I think I think that's over 2 million on the Scoville scale, isn't it?
Yes,
So
that's it. Yeah, yeah.
what comes out as I think 2,000 times hotter than a jalapeno pepper. I think.
Yes, and that's. I mean, when you think about basically the Scoville scale is based on dilutions. So if you take a chili that weighs 10 grams, then the way that the Scoville scale works is you have to use the whole chili. So there's no cheat. You can't just sort of take out the hot bit and measure that.
Sure.
It has to be the whole fruit. So that's probably why smaller fruits tend to score higher than larger fruit.
Yeah.
But it's fairly small fruit. So that would 2 million on the Scoville would mean that you would have to dilute that 2 million times 10
Yes.
in
Sure.
millilitres
Yeah.
of water before the heat would be sort of unnoticeable. So that's a considerable amount of water.
So I think just to kind of prove the point here, I think I'm going to have to take some of this home for. I've actually got some of this sauce already. I've bought some from the cafe.
Yeah.
And take some of it home for the co-presenters to try. So generous splash, I think, for them.
You'd certainly get some quiet airtime if they tried that on air. That's the usual first reaction to people that try it, is there's a bit of silence shortly after, maybe some hiccuping.
We'll see. Yeah. Well, good luck to them then.
Yes, yeah.
Well, we're sitting actually at the moment, it's coming to the kind of growing side of things. Sitting at the moment in a tunnel. I think you call it a polytunnel. Is that right?
Polytunnels, yes. These are the original polytunnels that we put up when we moved into this site in 2005. Miraculously still holding their first plastic skin, so we've done very well with these. This particular tunnel is our show tunnel, which is bare at the moment, but we plant that up soon. We've got capacity to grow about 3,000 production plants, crop plants here, which gets us something in the region of 10 to 15 tonnes a year. Vast majority of which we use in our production on site into sauces and preserves.
Great. Yes, I think just to explain to the listeners what it looks like in here, basically like sitting in a giant greenhouse, a bit like a scaled down version of the Eden Project, a bit.
Yeah. And one of our tunnels is a bit like Eden in the sense that it has sort of it has a double skin on it.
Sure.
So a bit like a big bubble, which helps us with insulation. That's the one we use for the nursery, so that just helps us sort of stretch the warmth in the day a little bit.
Sure, and I guess a bit like Eden as well. You've basically got a really diverse collection of lots of different strains here as well. A bit like
yes,
Eden.
yeah.
So I wonder if we could potentially walk through the kind of growing process a little bit to explain to the listeners what actually is involved in making these chili peppers.
Yeah, so it starts pretty much as soon as we finish one season, we're into the next. So the preparation starts in January with us clearing the ground. We get a tractor in, obviously fairly sort of mid-sized tractor in a polytunnel, and we start by ploughing, which just sort of helps to sort of break up the soil from the previous year's growth. Rotivate, and we dig some trenches. What we're trying to produce is a little bit of sort of slightly above ground trenches for the chilies. So they're not particularly good plants to grow in soil that's going to become wet and heavy.
Sure.
They like good air around the roots. So a bit like you would grow a potato, really. We don't earth them up. We don't need to do that, but we produce sort of mounds of earth, long sort of banks of earth, and plant the chilies directly into that, and that gives us a bit of protection if we have a wet summer. It's very deep soil here, but even so, we're at the bottom of the slope. So if we have a lot of rain, we can get a lot of surface water sort of coming in under the plants, so they need to be a little higher. We start sowing the seeds in January, February. We have that in sequence because there's certain dates that we have to meet.
Sure.
So the main one for us obviously is the crop, getting the crop plant in. There's 2,000 or 3,000 plants to get ready for about the middle of April. So what we'll do is once the polytunnels are prepared, we drag over a black plastic mulch that helps to control any weeds that might be invigorated. It helps to start getting solar energy into the ground. And what we're looking for is the soil temperature of about 20 degrees,
Right,
6
sure.
inches below where the roots are going to be. For us in this part of the UK, that arrives usually about mid-April.
Okay. Yeah.
So by then, we basically work back from that expectation date with the crop plants. We need about 8 weeks to produce a plant ready to go in the ground, usually in a what we call a 3-inch cell. The plant will be somewhere between 8 and 10 inches at that point, and they'll go straight in the ground from that cell. So that's the first thing that we have to try and schedule. The other things that we do a lot of is sending seedlings out in the post. Again, that's very weather dependent. We don't want to send those out in the post if there's going to be a frost, so we have to wait until usually late March before we send those out. So there's a sowing for those. Those would be germinated in fairly large numbers and then pricked out into what we call plugs.
Sure.
So these are little cylinders which have their own little sort of bag, if you like, and those go into little clamp boxes so we can send them safely in the post. And then we have 2 other sowings. One is for the nursery plants, which end up in pots to be sold mostly during the summer. And then there's the show tunnel collection. So that again, that we usually plant those late April. So again, we sort of back off about 8 weeks before sowing those. So there's
Sure.
lots of staged sowings. And by the end of this month, probably the nursery will be chock-a-block, and we'll be looking for space made by starting to plant crop to sow more to make more plants for the nursery. So it's a very, very busy time of year for us.
Brilliant. So you also mentioned that one of these tunnels is in fact a show tunnel, so people can come along and see some of this in
Yep.
action. When's a good time of year for people to do that if they're interested?
Probably worth holding until the sort of late July onwards, so that the show tunnel actually has quite a long period of looking quite spectacular. Probably its sweet spot is mid-August, but it does go on until December. We are sort of dependent again on the weather. If we have an early winter, so this year it came in quite early, so the show tunnel was looking a little sort of frostbitten by December. Previous year we still had plants that were looking as if winter hadn't happened in March the following year. So it does vary. We're hoping in time to move the show tunnel to a double skin polytunnel that we can then have 12 months of the year with applying some heat to keep them alive. So they're not frost hardy in any way at all. So as soon as there's a frost in the ground, then they're pretty much turned to dead sticks. So you can still harvest the chilies, but the plants have had it.
I think the last product I wanted to mention, actually, if it's right with you, because I must admit to being quite a beer fan, and I think, as in Cornwall actually, might have had a taste of the South Devon Chili Farm before. It's because I think I'm right in thinking that you teamed up with the St Austell Brewery at some point, didn't you, to make a chili beer?
Yes, they did. I think they called it a winter warmer or something
Yeah.
like that, and it was one of their sort of darker stout beers and with some chili chocolate in.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
So beer connoisseurs might have come across that. I think
Yeah.
I've seen some in your cafe at the moment, a different type of chili
Yes,
beer
that's
you've got at the moment.
care of Lion Brewery, a small microbrewery in Totnes.
Lovely.
And that's a sort of an IPA with a very sort of fruity, what they call an American style hops with some scorpion chili in, which isn't a mild chili.
Not to be
but
taken lightly.
But they put the right amount in,
Yes,
so it's still very quaffable beer. Yeah.
Well, Steve, thanks very much for joining us
Oh,
today.
you're
Real
welcome.
pleasure to have you on the programme. I'll put the links to the website and things on our Facebook, so listeners, if you're interested, you should definitely check them out. You can see what they've got on offer. You can come along to the farm and see them in the growing season as well. So, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thanks again for Steve for that interview. If you wanted to go along, I can tell you it's very, very much worth a day trip over to the South Devon Chili Farm. Check them out on the internet, southdevonchilifarm.co.uk. Open from 10 till 4:30 usually, so it's worth checking them out. Thank you again as well to Dr Lewis Halsey and Dr Faye Thompson for appearing on the show this week. And that is it from me now, actually. So tune in again next time, every Thursday, of course. Find us on Facebook, Cornwall's Science Sessions. If you want to listen to this show again or miss any of the previous ones, you can find the podcasts on there. So thank you very much. That is me gone. See you next time.